Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Advancing Manufacturing with Automation and AI. My name is Brett Bauer. I'm a principal at McKonly Asbury, and I'm one of the leaders in our manufacturing and distribution practice. Today, I'm joined by two of our special guests from MANTEC, Bruce and Don. Bruce, would you just do a quick introduction, who you guys are and a little bit about MANTEC?
Sure. Bruce Newell, I'm President and CEO of MANTEC. MANTEC is a non-for-profit that supports small to medium-sized manufacturers in all areas of their business. We specialize sales and marketing, process improvement, workforce engagement, and most relevant to today, manufacturing technology. So we can help any manufacturer fills the void with resources they don't have internally where they want to go in those areas. Go ahead, Don.
My name is Don Bolton. I am a business advisor for MANTEC. I handle manufacturing technology. We cover cybersecurity, automation, robots, AI, what we're dabbling into. Yeah, I've been at MANTEC for about 4 years.
Perfect. Bruce, Don, thanks again for joining us. Looking forward to this discussion. So next slide here. For those of you who don't know, McKonly Asbury is an accounting and business advisory services firm. We have 4 offices in Camp Hill, Lancaster, Bloomsburg, and Philadelphia. We provide a range of services to organizations across a variety of industries. You see them listed on the screen. And we encourage you to visit our website if you're interested in learning more. If you've joined us for past webinars, welcome back. If you haven't, we have a monthly webinar series that features various business topics to keep you updated on what's going on around us. So be sure to check out our website to catch past presentations as well as current information through our blog. All right, so the first polling question should have popped up on your screen. A little more housekeeping items. If you do have any questions during today's presentation, please submit them through the built-in questions function in the webinar control panel. We will do our best to answer them during the webinar if we have time, or we can follow up with you afterwards. And for those of you looking to obtain CPE for today's webinar, please keep in mind there will be 4 polling questions, and you'll need to answer all questions in order to obtain your CPE certificate, which will be emailed out in a few weeks after the webinar. All right, so we have the polling results. And let's move ahead looking at our agenda for the webinar. So the objectives here this afternoon for the webinar, we are looking first at just an overview, high-level review of where we're at today in terms of technology in manufacturing. After that, we're going to look at what are the benefits of progressing, the benefits of moving more and more into the Industry 4.0 embrace of technology. And then lastly, what are the practical next steps? How can we take the next step in that journey towards more fully embracing Industry 4.0? So kind of starting out with the what, and then the why, and finishing with the how. So the first part, just very basic understanding of which technologies are we talking about today. So most of these technologies are going to fall under this umbrella term Industry 4.0, which I assume most of you are familiar with. McKinsey has a pretty easy definition here for Industry 4.0 that I liked. They say Industry 4.0, which is also called the 4th Industrial Revolution, or 4IR, is the next phase in digitization of the manufacturing sector, driven by disruptive trends, including the rise of data and connectivity, analytics, human-machine interaction, and improvement in robotics. So it's a big umbrella term. There are a lot of different technologies that we could list here. We did just throw out some of the more common ones. So a very quick overview, starting with IoT, or the Internet of Things. IoT is the use of sensors which communicate a large amount of information to other devices. So examples of these would be sensors. This is more common in manufacturing. Sensors that are attached to machines, which can aid in things such as predictive maintenance. That's a common example of IoT. The next technology, which falls under Industry 4.0, as you're gathering all this new data through IoT, you end up with just large amounts of data, which unless you can refine and turn into something more useful, there's really no point in just big bodies of data. So advanced analytics takes those large data sets and turns it into actionable items. So one example of that would be supply chain optimization. That's getting more and more common in manufacturing. Let's see, advanced automation and robotics, that's pretty self-explanatory. While robotics might not be new, the advanced features, the use cases of robotics has certainly improved. That's why it's in this list under Industry 4.0. Digital twin is maybe less common. I'd be curious to hear from Don and Bruce. I know for me, I haven't run into digital twins, but I've read about it a good bit. It's essentially a virtual copy of a physical object. So you have car manufacturers, right, who are considering slightly different variations of models. They're still in the R&D phase. They can create a virtual model without a physical prototype and then run all kinds of testing, whether they're looking at the aerodynamics or whatever it may be. You can do that without a physical prototype. Don, have you run into digital twins? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I would like to step in and say that besides scanning product and maybe using it for R&D and stuff like that, we're finding that manufacturers are actually digital twinning their entire facility. So I've noticed a lot here in Pennsylvania, a lot of manufacturers, instead of buying another larger building, they'll add a sub-building onto their property and then sub-building after sub-building. But what we're finding is if we can digital twin the facility, we're able to throw it into simulation, take individual parts of your facility, move it around in a way that makes sense for process flow. And then we're also gaining more room because we're not having any space in between. We're not, no empty space. Like, 20 years ago, this machine went in, we never moved it, and now we're just putting machines around it. So we're actually digital twinning the entire facility, simming out that facility, finding the best process flow, and then doing it accordingly. So I think it's really neat. I think it's something that a lot of people get into, and as the technology becomes better, I think this will be a cheap option for people to maximize their space and facility.
That's what I was curious about. I feel like the only examples I've read of facilities using digital twin are some of the larger, Fortune 500 large manufacturers. Is it scalable yet to the small and medium-sized manufacturer? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have a company that does my digital twin go-to. They're out in Scranton, and yeah, they've done parts. They've helped with R&D, and then a couple of facilities as well. So and the facilities were small to medium-sized manufacturers, and the people that did it loved it enough to where they went and bought another handheld to do parts and stuff like that. So like I said, as the technology gets moving, I think a lot more shops, manufacturers especially, will start to include this in their wheelhouse.
Very cool. Additive manufacturing I've listed here again under Industry 4.0, more commonly called 3D printing. I guess similar question. I just ran into this in a manufacturing plant for the first time yesterday. I was out at a robotics company, and they'll use 3D printing for smaller parts of the robot. But other than that, I have not actually run into additive manufacturing. Have you guys seen this be integrated in the manufacturing process?
Well, integrated is interesting. I think we've seen more, and Don can speak to the more on-site, but I think what I've seen more is it's become, you have people specializing in it, so it becomes something to outsource rather than integrate. Okay. So, if you're not going to have, if you're doing a lot of prototyping, if you have a lot of product development or R&D, it may make sense to integrate. But at that small to medium sized shop, it's probably a feature where you can outsource for those things when you need them. So I think we've seen more of that, and we've seen some really high level, even small shops that are doing the 3D printing, providing great value back into the manufacturer. Don, I don't know if you see anything different. I'm sure there's examples out there. I know, you look around the state, Kennametal's one that I know integrated, but that's getting into a much larger organization, and it's not integrated everywhere. It's just in the plants that make sense for them to do it. So I've seen more of it as an outsourced service than an integrated process.
Yeah, and that's that's another thing. When you think of 3D printing, everybody assumes PLA, a plastic type material, and that such. But right now we're actually printing with metal, and we've gotten so good that we can go from brass to steel, and it be on the same stick. Like if we were building a rod, we could go brass to steel as a 3D printer. So I mean, they're using high power lasers and stuff like that. So I think that's another technology that as people keep playing with it and it keeps building, I think it's going to keep growing. And I agree with Bruce. I think it'll become more of an outsource because it's specialized. You're probably not going to use it all the time. It's nice. I mean, MANTEC has a small 3D printer, and we've done a lot of charity stuff with it. The Junior Achievement Center here in York, they let their kids play with the robot that they have, broke the fingers on it. So I went in, I designed the fingers, and then we were able to 3D print it and give it to them to help the kids and whatever. So then I had to print another 20 of them, and so now they have a little bit hanging out there. But
Very cool.
yeah, I think it's good. I think Bruce touched on this, but for R&D, I mean, everything is takeaway manufacturing. So if you get a block of steel, you cut it down, you make sure it fits. But if you cut too much, you lose that entire block of steel. It's expensive. So we'll do some R&D stuff to where, hey, does it fit? Yes, it fits. Okay, these are the specs. Now we can make it out of a more expensive material. Just function and fit before you go and spend a bunch of money doing steel or whatever you have to. So I agree with Bruce. I think R&D is the way to go for 3D printing and stuff like that.
Very interesting. So I truly don't know the answer to this. I'm hoping you guys do. When I think of 3D printing, I think of relatively small parts, basically ones that you can hold in your hand. Is that true, or are we at the point where we're doing 3D printing over larger parts? If so, how large?
It's all robotics. It's all sensors. It's all. I mean, they're essentially, it's along the same line, but they're 3D printing houses.
Oh wow.
A lot of foundation work in some areas it's still cement, you know what I mean? But it's the same mechanics as 3D printing. So I think we're getting there. And the issue with that is you need a bed that's flat. You need to have, your artisans and stuff need to be set up right. So, but I think once we keep moving on this, I think the sky's the limits on some of this stuff.
That's great. The last technology I have down there is artificial intelligence. We'll actually dig into this in more detail here on the next slide. So let me start out just giving credit. This graph comes out of a May 2024 report from the National Association of Manufacturers called Working Smarter, How Manufacturers Are Using Artificial Intelligence. I liked this chart because I think there's been a lot of confusion when people throw around the term artificial intelligence. What are they talking about? It is such a large term, and this chart kind of breaks it down into multiple layers and subsets. So there's artificial intelligence as the umbrella term. Then within that, a subset would be machine learning, which it analyzes data, tries to recognize patterns, and then make decisions off of those patterns that it's identified. Deep learning would be a subset of machine learning. So it's kind of taking ML and compounding it with multiple layers of machine learning. And then generative AI, which is getting a lot of attention, being a subset of deep learning. Wondering if you guys can give just some practical examples of AI tools that might fit in and just help us understand which category would that fit in here.
I can give you a couple examples that I've seen in the manufacturing sector, and I'm sure Don can as well. At the smallest level, I've seen a very small manufacturer introduce a sensor that has the ability to do some learning and connect back that allows for them to take a single point of failure and develop a preventive maintenance schedule off of a critical piece of equipment, right? So very simple. It wasn't $1 million investment. It was, thousands of dollars investment with tremendous, very fast ROI and tremendous returns and uptime and production. So that's at the smallest level. I've also seen a job shop with Metal Fab actually start to be able to take their data out of their systems, and then using AI, they were tracking what they thought was 4 problem areas. When they actually got a data subset and got AI involved in interpreting and looking at the data, they identified they actually had 93 problem areas. And then you go, oh man, like now we can't even tackle this. But then it was broken out, paint, weld, metal fab, bending. And then you started to see where human error overlapped as the root cause. So they got to root cause and were able to actually get to identify and start to have, here's the biggest impact to our business. Here's what we should tackle first. And in one case, it was global human error. Why are we having human error across all areas? So that came down to some job instructions and some training and other things. And then why we have, let's tackle where 60% of our problems are first. So there was a case of having all the data, but AI allowed them to get the data into a usable, decisionable, state that with tremendous impact on the business. And then on a larger scale, and I'm not sure exactly where this fits in, but a larger manufacturer that literally took decades of the institutional learning that was out there, and AI allowed them to create a directable, shareable, and searchable system of knowledge, accessible with permissions, a task that would have taken a human. It would have never gotten done, right? But what they found was they had so many engineering and R&D things, they were recreating things that had been created in the past because no one had access to that knowledge. And the use of AI allowed them in a couple months, I think it was about a 4-month process, to take millions of documents and get it into a usable system to make them more streamlined in their access to knowledge and not recreating work. So that's like 3 examples, kind of small, medium, and large, where it's either data or machine learning or some other areas where you get, because to me, if it doesn't become decisionable, what's its impact to your business? And in those cases, all became decisionable. I'm sure Don's seen a bunch of others. I'm happy to let him weigh on that as well.
I'll chime in with 2 small ones, two brief. One is personal. So I came from manufacturing. I spent 13 years in manufacturing. I led shop employees in some dirty conditions. So my communication skills were a little bit different than some of the other business professionals that I meet on a day-to-day. So my emails were very direct. They were spot on, but they were direct. And so with the onset of AI, I was told, hey, make your emails more wordy. So when AI came about, I bought into it. I pay for a service. And so when hey, thanks, I appreciate it, I'll get back to you, I go over to ChatGPT. I say, hey, make this more professional, make it more wordy, help me out, help me not sound like the guy on the shop floor. And it's done wonders for myself. I don't know if the other people appreciate the emails as much as I appreciate someone doing the bulk of the nonsense in the email, but it's been good. And then I have a vendor that I use, and they're a robot integrator, and they have some engineers in Argentina and some engineers, I think, in Brazil, and then here as well. And so when we do a meeting for a project, we have a chat bot and an AI that listens to the meeting, and then it can actually pull out action items from that meeting and say, Pablo has action item this, this, and this. Don has action item this, this, and this. And then knowing that that's going to go to some of the people in Brazil, it'll move it to the dialect, the appropriate dialect, not just the language, not just Spanish, but it moves it to the dialect too for the area, which is really super cool. So you can build these bots, whether it be like I said, or maybe you want to use it for sales and marketing. You dump in your website, you dump in your competitor's website, you tell it that you want to exploit the differences. It's able to do all that stuff to where, like Bruce said, a human would take hours, if not days and weeks, to do some of this stuff. So I would say that if you're not using it, buy into it, play around with it. It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to take over the world. I don't think they're built with a mindset to want that. So I get that question sometimes. No, I don't think they're going to take over.
I think those are some really good examples. And what I like about the range of examples that you both shared is it's not just AI automation on the plant floor. You're also talking about some back office, whether it's sales, human resources, finance. There are applications across the entire company, and it's worth digging into from each area.
Even at MANTEC, one more small example at MANTEC, every month we're doing our invoicing for our projects. Our BAs, if we have 4 BAs, they were averaging 3 hours a month each, so 12 hours a month. So we're losing a day and a half of potential client interactions just to do invoicing. We invested in a software system that uses AI. I was with a BA yesterday. He did his monthly invoicing in 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's been phenomenal.
So, I mean, so times that by 4. So now we're going to take 12 hours to less than 30 minutes. I mean, over a course of a year, that should account for, we can have 15 more, 25 more meetings with clients to help solve real problems, not process invoices. So,
right.
Yeah.
And for those employees, that has to be far more interesting, I'm sure.
Right.
It's
interesting. And it's cultural too, right? I mean,
yeah, it's made it a lot easier. And I think from my side, I'm looking at it as, well, that only saves me a couple of minutes. But then you look at it from Bruce's side, from the CEO side, and you're like, okay, 3, 6, 9, 12. I mean, then it starts to add up. Then it starts to make sense in dollars to a company. So yeah, the small incremental changes make differences down the way.
Good. All right, so we ran through some of the technologies that are out there today under the umbrella term Industry 4.0. This next slide, I borrowed this graph from Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. He talks about an innovation curve. So starting on the far left, this basically is tracking how quickly people are to adopting new technologies or process changes. So on the far left, you have 2.5% of the population who are considered innovators, the first ones to adopt. You have early adopters, early majority at 34%, late majority at 34%. And then the very last group, the slowest to adopt changes, adopt new technologies, would be the laggards at 16%. Just curious to get your perspective. We're doing this webinar in South Central PA. Where would you say South Central PA manufacturers fall on this innovation curve?
Don, let me jump in at a top level, and then I'll let you jump in at a more practical level, because I want to be very careful here. My gut is to say, look as far to the right of that curve as possible. This is my first. But I don't want to be unfair, because if you were to go into any manufacturing shop, you're going to see technology somewhere, right? So it's not, I mean, it's not like they're running overhead belt systems to run machines, and hand drill. I mean, so there's technology. So I don't want to, but when I think about it from a standpoint of adopting to maximize productivity, that's where I would say we're definitely, at best case, late majority, but I think we're much more in the laggard. And I think, again, I look at this kind of top level. Don mentioned his experience. Don came out of Michigan and the automotive world. So if you're in Western Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, if you're not playing with automotive, you're probably not playing in the game at all. And if you're going to support automotive in some way, you had better be on pace with what they need. So they're going to drive that level of innovation that's required. South Central PA has an unbelievably diverse manufacturing base, which is fantastic. It's great for GDP. We're usually the last into a recession and the first out because, you know, we're not dependent on a sector. We're also very dominated by small to medium-sized manufacturers. They make up over 90% of the manufacturing base. Without that critical mass of an industry driver that's going to push, you know, you have a lot of people that are going to, you know, as long as they're getting by and hitting what they think their goals are, they're going to be very slow to adopt. So I don't want to bang too hard on the manufacturers. On the flip side, I say all the time, you are competing on a worldwide basis, whether you know it or not. And if you fall too far behind this curve, you may find yourself unable to get where you need to be in a timely enough basis to stay competitive. So I think we're late majority to laggards. And I think it's probably because I don't think we're measuring the right things. I think not enough manufacturers are focused on maximum productivity. They're looking at, well, my net income was X last year, it's up 5% this year, or whatever number, I'm good. Well, that's not an optimization model. That's a things are okay model. And I think that's what gets you in trouble in the long run. So I'll back off and let Don give his view on that.
Well,
I think
one second.
Yeah, I think we would resonate the same sentiments as Bruce. I think we're towards the end of that. Bruce said it. I mean, I'm from Michigan, to where I can walk in I could pick a shop almost at random, and they'll have a robot, or they're using some kind of data set on their machines and collecting it and making decisions based off that. So I think it's a little slow to move this way, and I think the problem we're seeing right now with that advanced technology, I think that we're not looking at the same thing like Bruce said, and we're not, hey, it's $150,000 to get a robot. Well, I made money last year, so do I really need it? Do I need to? But you need to keep building that competitiveness. $150,000 for a robot system. My ROI is 18 months. In almost every facility that I've ever put a robot in here in Pennsylvania, 18 months return on investment. So you can't argue with that. You just need to do it.
Right. We do have our second polling question here that we're going to start, which is basically to get your input on this innovation curve. So where is your company at in the innovation curve? Is it at the very front end, the innovator, the early adopter, early majority, late majority, or laggard? So we'll keep this open here for a little bit. We'll certainly be curious to see where everyone lands. I'm
curious to know where people think they are. It's like that old question, like, no one likes public school, but everyone loves their public school. So do you think where you stand is in reality or not? Would be a good question.
And I know we're hitting hard on manufacturers because that's a space that Bruce and I live in.
Sure.
But this is for everybody. This is for even, insurance firms and stuff like that. Are you using AI?
Right.
Do you have permissions and stuff like that set up for your email? Even stuff like that is technology, maybe not advanced technology, but early majority. Okay.
It's a pretty good spread.
Yeah, that sure is.
I want names and numbers off this list. I want to talk to some of these people.
I'd love to talk to the innovators because we could love to have them become spokespeople for the sector.
Absolutely.
Because I'm guessing that 25%, those first two, have seen fundamental and transformative change in their businesses from those investments.
Yeah,
good. That was a really good question, and I like that everybody was all over the place. So just like PA, we've got a good mix. And
right. All right. So we're going to move on to the next section of the agenda. Essentially, why move forward with automation and AI? What are the benefits? So first question that I'd pose to you guys, before we focus too much on technology, just back up and think, what are some of the challenges that our manufacturers are facing today?
Well, I think supply chain was a hot topic and still will continue to be, but I think that's normalized to some extent, at least become manageable. Obviously, the pandemic just just wreak complete havoc with supply chains. I have two buckets I'd put it in: workforce, and I'm going to call the second bucket, again, it's a little bit of a theme, productivity. So if we look at workforce, we've got demographic challenges, right? We have fewer people and fewer skilled people. And I think within those demographic challenges, I would say a lot of owners and upper management and the clients we have look a lot like me, a little bit less like Don as far as age. And they're probably for the first time in their career operating in an employee-driven job market as opposed to employer. And I think there's a lot of adaptations you need to make to understand. It is not just I open my door, they will come, and why would I even tell them they're doing a good job? Isn't that what they're supposed to do? Kind of mentality. I mean, so we really are. There's just the boomers have finally really exited in mass, and I'm part of the smallest generation in the history of the country. So there's just not as many people, and that's just a numbers problem. And you mentioned Simon Sinek, which I think is interesting. When I have two Gen Zs myself, right, two daughters, and I'm around a lot of them and millennials as well. And I actually have very high praise and high hopes for those generations. They get banged on a little bit, but I see them as being great. But they want to know the why. Like, it's not just enough to say, here's the job. And if you're not going to invest in them and provide for them that structure and that why, they're not sticking around long. And I think that's a fundamental change that's not even my generation. I mean, that's coming behind me. Like pay, that's just table stakes. That's the ante. I mean, yes, you've got to be competitive in your pay, but you've got to create a culture. You got to create a culture of why, value that people want to be a part of. And I think those are big challenges. In fact, I hate the term job. I want to talk about pathways and careers. I don't even like the term job. To me, a job's just a commodity. I can go get that anywhere. But what can I get that adds real value to it? What's an asset? And to me, the other big issue is productivity, because again, I look at the high level. Productivity drives GDP, and GDP drives wages and standard of living. So if we don't focus on productivity, we end up, and if you look at Pennsylvania compared to its neighboring states, we are trailing in productivity to all of them: Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, New Jersey. So we're just not getting there. And I think it goes back to like that, a little bit too much focus on profitability, which is not the same thing as productivity. Do we have the right KPIs in place? What are we measuring? And this is where a place where I think technology, and they also go together. If you have fewer people, productivity becomes a must if you're going to stay in business, right? You need to be as efficient, as productive as possible. So to me, there's a lot of problems. I put those as the two big challenges. I think employers and manufacturers see the workforce challenge. I don't know they see the productivity challenge, and maybe they think I'm crazy, but to me, I think it's a bigger issue than we realize.
No,
I don't know. What do you see out there?
I think you're right. I mean, look at that time study I just did for one of our clients. It was not a process flow issue. It was the people. They weren't happy for one reason or the other. And the biggest takeaway from that was, at some points, some of your employees are gone for hours throughout the day. They just don't want to be there. They've got no incentive. And so you have to learn that the times have changed, and people, their value systems have changed. They want home time, and like Bruce said, they want to be upskilled, and they want to know that someone cares about them. The money is no longer good enough. And that goes right into, yes, we're introducing robots into these facilities, but not one robot that we've installed has taken a job. It's always been a great opportunity for that employer to upscale their current employees that are willing to be there, the ones that want to stay, your good employees. We take them and we turn them from machine operators to robot programmers. And now their resume was here, and now it's up here. So I would say continue to invest in your employees. That's where it's going to be your greatest return on investment.
Yeah, those are great points. And in some sense, you guys have started to answer this next question as well. Let me know if you have anything additionally to add. But we outlined some of the challenges facing manufacturers, being supply chain issues, workforce issues, and there are multiple sides to the workforce issues, like Bruce mentioned, and then also productivity. So of those challenges that manufacturers are facing, how can technology help to alleviate some of the impact of those challenges?
We have a client and former board member client of MANTEC as an example, plastic injection molding shop. 7, 8 years ago, they had one operator per machine. With the use of automation and robotics, they are now having one operator per 6 machines, right? And they have way more employees than they had 7 years ago, right? So, and so even that one operator has a pathway to technician, has a pathway. They have now more engineers, more service techs, more automation experts. They've got a clean room on site now. So there's an example when you talk about productivity and workforce. They've and it's also in a very great, clean, nice environment. But yeah, that's an example. They're tackling workforce and productivity at the same time. Like I think they're a great example of using technology in really phenomenal ways to kind of solve problems, create capacity, and give them a competitive advantage in the field. I mean, that's one example. I recently ran into a client that they've got a water source that they have to control. That's an incoming part of their plant. That was requiring 2 people just driving all day because they're responsible to keep a level of water, and they have DEP and all kind of things involved. They've now been able to install sensors and technology that is feeding back into the plant. And it's not, so there's a case of there was a job that had a constant turnover and was really non-value add. Those 2 employees did not lose their job. They've been upskilled and moved into a different area of the plant doing better things. So there's lots of examples out there. Those 2 that recently have come out of me. I mean, you can also look at another workforce challenge. I've seen some metal fab shops with laser cutters. They install that tower, and then they've got the automation and the ability to connect and run jobs, and now they're running lights out metal cutting. So they can pick up a 3rd shift the first operation. So they can take a bottleneck and unbottleneck it without having to hire another skilled person. And now you got to back in, figure out who's going to weld it, who's going to bend it, who's going to punch it, all those other things. But there's an example. People don't even think of that as automation, but that's automation. It's just an attachment on the machine. It's an option to buy or not buy. But I saw a shop go from not buying it, and they didn't buy it because they didn't have a tall enough door to put the tower on. I mean, that was their decision point. So we were able to help them solve that problem. And now they've got that automation. Now they've gone to a 24-hour cutting cycle. So massive increase in, again, productivity and answers some workforce. I'm sure Don's seen 100 examples out there where we're seeing it solve the problems.
I love the lights out. I think that's the greatest thing. We have a client, little old lady. She is 68 years old, and she takes a disc about this big, a plastic disc, puts it in a machine, it cuts it, she puts it in a box. This lady does 600 an hour. 68 years old. They can't fill that position because everybody hates it, and nobody even comes close to her times. So it's a wash. So she's like, hey, I know I'm only 32 hours. Come this summer when my grandkids, I'm cutting in half. They're like, well, what are we gonna do? They had one of management running that job because people refuse. So we're gonna put a robot in there with a stack. So if somebody comes by, they feed the stack, robot with an eye on the end, goes through, it moves it to the machine cuts it, it places it in the box, and it just keeps going. Now, I will tell you this, we cannot come close to that 600 an hour, even with a robot. Like, wow. It's phenomenal. But to Bruce's point, what we're gonna do is we're gonna run it through the day, and then at night, when everybody goes home, we're gonna stack it up, let it run. And when that robot runs out of parts, it just powers down. Everything just shuts down. It's on a switch. I mean, you're not losing anything. It's always value add at that point. Another piece of technology. Everybody's seen the AI. You're shopping for a car nowadays. They have an AI chatbot, directs you to this or that. You know, a lot of companies are starting to do that. So if you have a product and you're selling, install a chatbot into your sales process that says, hey, it grabs somebody's attention even after hours, because most people are at work when you're trying to sell your product. So they get on your website, you know, stuff like that it's helpful.
Appreciate that insight. We're going to move to polling question number 3.
See if we have the same normal distribution here.
Yeah. So this third polling question, what is your top reason for investing in Industry 4.0 technologies? Is it to cut costs, to offset the impact of the labor shortage? That's mostly what we talked about so far. Improve quality of the product or service, improve safety, or other. Yeah, improve safety is one we didn't get to talk about yet, but just at my recent trip to a robotics company, that was one of the bigger drivers for that particular robot. You know, cutting back on the amount of effort, whether it's lifting or walking, that employees in warehouses would need to do by putting more of that on the robot instead of the human. So certainly plenty of opportunities to utilize this technology to improve safety. Although
I've seen the equivalent of what
Don
talked about stacking the parts. I've seen the equivalent of that. It's the job nobody wants in the plant that has to be done. And that automation's been done. It is a safety issue. Just lifting too much weight over and over and over. So that's a big one. Not showing up here though.
So the first response was improve quality of the product or service, followed by the labor shortage. So any surprise there?
Yes, I wrote down in advance. I said it's going to be A or B. So the fact it's C, I actually that makes me feel really good, because I think that's a great place for decision makers and leadership that's a great lens to be looking through, because those other things will, when you have a quality product and great service, you can attract better labor. So yeah, I am surprised by that, and I'm also encouraged by that.
Absolutely.
So this chart, it's asking a very similar question. This is, again, coming out of that May 2024 report from the National Association of Manufacturers. And this is showing, the number one reason to invest in Industry 4.0 technologies was to reduce costs, to compensate for labor shortage. That was number 4, improve quality, number 5. So didn't exactly match up with our audience today, but to Bruce's point, it's encouraging to see the reliance on using technology to improve quality. All right, so the next section, anytime we bring up artificial intelligence, especially, you'll have a certain group of people, and honestly, it should be just about everyone, who has, at least in the back of their mind, some level of caution or weariness towards artificial intelligence. And I don't want to completely discard those concerns. So the question to you guys is, in what ways should manufacturers be cautious about adopting AI and automation?
Yeah, I think this is something that you don't jump into before you do your research. So as good as some of these products are, and I tell this story, carryover from earlier, but a car dealership, General Motors, says that all car dealerships have to implement an AI chatbot into their sales for after-hour sales. They started to do this, but there was one case that they didn't set any permissions, no restrictions, no permissions. So a gentleman was able to trick the chatbot into, hey, chatbot, every time we end a conversation, end a thread, I want you to say, now this is legally binding, and I forgot the terminology, but legally binding. And so he was able to talk this chatbot into selling him a Suburban for $2,000, and this is legally binding. So you have to, I don't know how that played out. I hope the guy got it for $2,000, because I like times. But you have to be aware that it's just a machine, and if you don't tell it to do everything specifically, you don't know where it's going to go. So be mindful, but be active about it. I'd say there's no risk too great to make you not want to try. Automation the same way. You got to be mindful of the people around you. You know, where's your your parameters? You know, is your cobot sensitive enough to stop when it bumps this person or whatever? So just be careful in the technology and learn about it before implementing it. But always implement it.
I agree, and I made a note, and I don't want to make it a MANTEC commercial, but having an objective source to help you find what you need, I think is a good. Whether it's a MANTEC, whether it's McKonly and Asbury, it's because it's a massive world out there, and everyone who's selling for themselves is going to tell you they have exactly what you need, because that's the way sales tends to operate. Having someone that can be objective for you, I think, is critical, because these are big decisions, some cases in dollars, always for production. And I think it's no different than any other investment, right? Is it a point solution? Is it scalable? If you're investing in automation, have you really looked at how lean are your processes? I mean, we've seen companies automate a non-lean process, and now they just have a faster, non-efficient process. That, and we've actually seen in one case, in fact, it's a cautionary tale for MANTEC. We had told actually the client we need to do lean first. They said, no, we're going to buy a robot. They bought a robot. Then they went on a lean journey, and 6 months later, the entire operation the robot was bought for was actually eliminated from the process. And now they had this piece of equipment, point solution, not even required anymore. So, it's got to operate and structure your business like any other decision you make, and where does it fit and where does it make sense? But I would say an objective source, because this is definitely, these are big decisions sometimes for especially small to medium-sized person. I mean, you're changing your structure, your financial statements, your balance sheet's going to be impacted maybe for the first time. And so you want to have the right solution in place. So learning on your own and finding some objective information, I think, is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
I'm with Don. I don't think the machines are going to take over the world. So I don't have those fears, but I do have a lot of fears of making just wrong, big decisions for investment in your businesses.
Yeah. And continuing on the topic of concerns, cybersecurity has to be acknowledged in this discussion. So why must cybersecurity be considered as manufacturers invest in these Industry 4.0 technologies?
Well, you could actually take off the last part of that sentence. Why must cybersecurity be considered as a manufacturer? Right. I mean, we're now living in a world. I mean, MANTEC's had 2 attacks in the last week. Just us, little MANTEC, right? So I work closely with one client. They got hit for a 6-figure issue with cybersecurity. So we're just, even if you've not gone in on AI or Internet of Things or anywhere else, you are operating in a virtual, you're in the cloud, you're operating in a technological space. And these are, cybersecurity is massive. Don, I'll let you speak more to it. I think probably everyone is underestimating their vulnerabilities and their exposure.
I would think so as well. Just like every year or so you shop for new or different insurance, I think every year or so you should do a cybersecurity thing. Get an assessment. Let's face it, even our CNC machines are networked in. Someone, if they can get access to that, they can control it. You could lose material. They could mess with your program. They could hijack all your stuff. And now you come in the next day, your machines won't run. You don't have any of the prints to complete your jobs. And these bad actors, if you will, they treat it like a business. They say, hey, well, you're welcome. We'll tell you where the problem is. Now pay us, and we'll give you all your stuff back. And then typically give you all your stuff back, which is like, normally you'd think a bully would be like, I'm not really giving it back. But I think cybersecurity should be top of the list. It's something like 48% of all small and medium-sized, just manufacturers, not as a whole, but 48% of them have had a cyber attack. And I think something like half or just over half that have had 2. And to Bruce's point, we have a couple of clients in our area that have been hit. So South Central PA, in our backyard, they've been hit. Their data has been stolen, corrupted, ransomed, you name it. So at the very least, put your employees through some phishing exercises, send them a couple of things, make it look real. If they click on it, have that talk with them. This has become a huge thing, and you don't really know, like, opening an email is fine, but it's, hey, my CEO sent me this thing, click on this link to sign for your bonus check or something, and then they click on it, and now your entire system is affected. And it happens just like that from one person in the back office in the back corner. Now your whole company's infected. So.
Yeah, those are excellent points.
Yeah,
so
we did a whole webinar on cybersecurity.
We have about 10 minutes left in the webinar. We want to move on to the practical next steps, the how part of this webinar. So we're going to start out with a question here, polling question number 4. In which area will your next investment in automation or AI take place? So are you going to invest in automation and AI on the production side, the warehousing side of things, marketing, human resources, or finance and accounting? I'm curious, Don and Bruce, do you have any expectations on this one? Is there a category here that to you seems like the low-hanging fruit, the place to start?
I mean,
my guess is it's either going to come in on production or it's going to come in on the non-production area where people are more comfortable with current tools. Yeah, there you go. There's a comfort level around.
It's like you saw that before we did.
I think I nailed that one.
I think we also have a lot of accountants on this call, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say that might be some audience bias there.
AI is gonna make your jobs easier. It's working that direction.
Absolutely.
I'm no warehousing, huh? And there's a lot of cool things with automatic movers, product pullers. I mean, they developed a track system that goes over your existing racking. It runs on a track, and it just zips back and forth. It can do multiple part orders and stuff like that. So a lot of cool stuff out there. A lot of cool stuff.
All right, so as we saw kind of on the question on the last slide, the polling question, there are a lot of different areas where a business could choose to invest in automation and AI, which could benefit different branches of their operations or their business. So how should a company go about making that decision as to which area to start out in or which area to invest in?
Well, I'll let you take this.
I wrote down a couple things. Don, I'll let you speak to as well. I wrote down, where is your pain? Where are your bottlenecks? Where are your repetitive tasks? Where's your non-value add? Where are your dangers, for safety? And who are you not serving that you could serve by creating some capacity in those areas? I mean, those are, simplistic, but not. But to me, where's your pain? Where's your pain? Where's your non-value add? And let's go there first. And I'm a bottleneck guy. I have 30 years of production. I'm always a bottleneck guy. So if you've got one, what can you do to create a new bottleneck somewhere else and then move that one forward?
Yeah, I think to make that determination, where are you going to get the most value? Like, there's always a couple of jobs that everybody wants to automate, but if you're starting off on this journey, find something that's going to produce for you. Find something that's going to take that ROI and cut it down. And that'll give you the most value. And I think that builds the necessary camaraderie, if you will, between the people on the floor, mid-level management, and then CEO level, because you have to have everybody invested in this. So find something that makes sense, find something that everybody would be happy with, implement it, and then build off of that. Don't stop, because once you stop, you start to lose that momentum.
That's really good, Don. I actually had written down too, this is a journey. Don't be afraid to start small. Like it, you're going to take the first step, get a win.
Yep.
It's like getting a new job, right? When you start a new position, either in your own company or a new company, it's like you want an early win somewhere. Find yourself a win on this journey that has everyone go, oh, I see why we're thinking about doing this. And yeah, no doubt about it.
That company with the wafers that the lady was trimming, they have 2 weld robots that they're really underutilized. But the problem is they're a little more of a job shop, so it's continually programming, reprogramming, building new fixtures for placement. And so when I went in to look at this job, I said, yeah, that's possible, but let's take a walk. So we walked to that facility. And then the next day we went out to their other facility. And I saw this lady, and what they do is they hook your wrist. I'm going to call them shackles. They put shackles on your wrist, and then a cable runs up behind you and up to the machine. So when the press comes down, it pulls you back physically. It's the weirdest thing you've ever seen. So and that's the process with this little old lady. That's the process we went for, because the fundamental idea of what is happening in that process was easy to duplicate and replicate through a robot. And even though we're not matching her speed, we're still beating the time because we can run when she can't. So
Right.
Really small. I think it's going to cost them under $150,000 to automate this process. And and then you take into account you're reducing your burden rate, you're reducing your management time having to be there. So yeah, start small.
Fewer shackles too. That
Fewer,
helps.
Yeah.
I wish I had a picture. I'd love to share it right now.
No, we're not doing that.
No, some of what you guys said dovetails into our final question here. So now you've determined that area where you have the pain points or the bottlenecks. You know where you want to spend. What are the steps in order to have a successful implementation?
I don't think I can overstate this enough. This is, first of all, picture this like a technology project, which is what it is, which means it will cost more than you think. It will take longer to implement than you realize, right? And so when you start at that fundamental piece of it, you have to have leadership buy-in. Like, this is a cultural change to your business. You're going to be doing things differently. So I think there has to be leadership buy-in and leadership driven from the standpoint of we are in on this and we're going to see it through. And then you've got to get buy-in. But this can't be, if this is middle up down, I think it tends to fail more. The engineer sees it right away.
Yep.
But the second leadership is like, our on-time delivery dropped from 95 to 80. What's going on? And they want to abandon the whole thing. It's like, it's not going to be perfect to implement things. It is technology. It sometimes isn't easy. So I think it's really about making this a cultural point of order and infusing in your business from a leadership perspective, and then getting everyone's input. I think the buy-in also comes, but I think leadership's got to drive it. I really do. That's my opinion.
Same, like to a T, nothing more to say. If you're not getting everybody on this train, it's not stopping at the right stations. You get management to buy in because ultimately they're the ones that fund it. The middle guys, like you said, the engineers, they're probably the ones that see it. But if they see it, mention it to the people on the floor. The people on the floor is a different group than the engineers, and we don't like each other. Engineers don't know the real world applications, and the engineers are saying that the people on the floor just don't know anything. So get everybody, and then have a talk with the people that are based. The people on the floor say, hey, look, we're going to bring in a robot. We're going to see how it does. Our future projection is more robots. Here's what we see happening. We put this robot in. Yes, your job is eliminated, but we're going to send you to become a programmer. We're going to train you. 3-day course. I can set this up. Now they're a programmer, and now you stay at this. And instead of pushing buttons and lifting dirty parts, you're fixing robots and making programs. And so, yeah, I think Bruce hit it right on the head.
Awesome. Appreciate that answer. So I have a last slide here with some contact information in case you guys do think of questions you want to reach out to either Bruce or Don or myself. We have our emails listed there. I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Again, a special thanks to Bruce and Don for joining us. A recording from today's presentation will be posted on our website and social media sites in a few days. And for those of you who requested CPE and answered the polling questions, those certificates will be sent out in the next 2 weeks. We do have an upcoming webinar here on June 27th. This is going to be on unlocking ESOPs, best practices for valuation oversight and ERISA compliance. So go on our website to register for that. That's it for today. Thanks again for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks, everyone.